Greetings, happy Friday when you're watching this, or if you happen to watch it sooner. Today we are going through chapters 2 and 3 for the final, and when we did this over distance learning, at the beginning of distance learning, we did chapter 2A to 3B, 2A to 3A, and then we did 2B to 3B. So this is broken up in that way. This is 2A to 3A, and then the next video will go over 2B to 3B. And it's broken up like this because this first chapter we did is on solving quadratics, and we also saw some imaginary numbers. But the main topics that we're going to focus on for the final is solving quadratics, so by factoring, completing the square, and using the quadratic formula, and then also looking at the discriminant and what that means. So to solve a quadratic by factoring, or to solve in any of these ways, we first want to get the quadratic into standard form. So standard form is when we have ax squared plus bx plus c. So you've got your x squared term first, then your x term, and then your constant. So here we've got 2x squared on this side. Then we want to bring x over, so minus x minus 3 equals 0. And to solve by factoring, we have a leading coefficient, so we need to multiply the negative 3 times 2. There's a few different ways you can do this. If you do the magic x, that's fine. If you're in my class, I showed you guys the columns, so we need two numbers that multiply to negative 6, and they need to add to the middle term, which is negative 1. Another way you can do it is called guess and check. Feel free to look that up. If you're interested in it, you'll be doing that more in Math 3 next year. So two numbers that multiply to negative 3 and add to negative 1 are negative 3 and positive 2. So we rewrite this original function, and these two numbers that we just came up with, we replace the middle term with. So this is now negative 3x plus 2x. So all we did was come up with numbers to change negative x into these two numbers that will allow us to factor by grouping. So you can group the first two terms, last two terms, or if you had these written in the other order, that would work as well. And when you group them, you can see 2x squared and negative 3x both have x in common, so we can take that out, which leaves you with 2x minus 3 plus, and then 2x and negative 3 only have the number 1 in common, so let's take out a 1, 2x minus 3. And if you factored correctly, you should get the same thing in the two parentheses. So we have 2x minus 3 and x plus 1 equals 0. Set these equal to 0. So if you set 2x minus 3 equal to 0, we get 2x equals 3. So x is 3 over 2. And x plus 1 equals 0, we get x is negative 1. So these are the two solutions, and you could check them by plugging back into the original quadratic. For number 2, this is completing the square, and I just went with a more complicated one so that you see a little bit easier ones on the review and on the final. You won't see more than one of these on the final though. So this is a little bit harder because there's a 2 here. When you complete the square, you need the leading coefficient to be 1. So the first thing you want to do is see if this is 2, are all the numbers even? Yes, they're all even, so that means that we can divide everything by 2. You can divide both sides by 2. So that's x squared minus 8x minus 4 equals negative 56. And completing the square, we've got to get it in the form x squared plus bx plus, and then c is the value we're coming up with when we complete the square. We're going to come up with the number here that makes it so we can factor this into a perfect square so that we get some quantity squared. So to get a blank here, we need to move the negative 4 over. So if we add 4 to both sides, this is now negative 52. And then whatever we add to the left side, we're also going to add to the right side. So to come up with c, c is always half of b squared, so b over 2 squared. So half of negative 8 is negative 4, squared is 16. Add 16. And the reason why it's half of b squared is we need a number, we need a term to go here that will allow us to multiply to 16 but add to negative 8. So it's always half of the b term, which is negative 4. So x minus 4 squared, the terms in the middle would add to negative 8x, and the 4's at the end multiply to positive 16. So, and then on the right side, this is negative 36. And because this is a perfect square, to undo it, we take the square root of both sides. And when you take the square root, we get positive or negative. Don't forget, there's going to be two solutions here. So on the right side, the square root cancels out with the square. That's x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 36. And before we went over imaginary numbers, we would have said, okay, there's no solution. But because we know how to take the square root of a negative number now, we can simplify this more. So first I'm going to bring the 4 over to the right side, add it to both sides, plus or minus. We know the square root of 36 is 6, so we can take out a 6. If we took out a 6, then we'd be left with a negative 1 inside. But the square root of negative 1 is equal to I, so we can take out an I. So the solutions are 4 plus 6i and 4 minus 6i. And that's completing the square. For number 3, it says solve the quadratic, and we've got some terms on both sides using the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula, it is open notes on the final, so you can have this out, but you do need to work on memorizing it. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So first we need to get this into standard form, get everything on the left side. So we have 2x squared plus 7x. I'm going to subtract the 3x from both sides. And then subtract 4 from both sides. So 2x squared plus 4x plus 5 is equal to 0. And now we can identify a, b, and c. So from up here, quadratic, a, b, and c. So a is 2. And I recommend you write them off to the side to make sure you're plugging in the right numbers and with the right signs. B is positive 4, C is positive 5. So we've got x equals negative b, that's negative 4. If b was negative, then it would make it positive. It's the opposite of whatever the sign is. So negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 5, all over 2 times a, which is 2. And then we simplify negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, this is 16 minus, and then this multiplies out to 40. So 16 minus 40 is negative 24. So we're going to get another imaginary solution here. So we've got the square root of negative 24, which we want to simplify. So numbers that go into 24, that's 4 and 6, which means we can take out a 2 because we have a pair of 2's. So this is negative 4 plus or minus, take out a 2. If we take out a 2, then we're left with the square root of negative 6 all over 4. Because this is negative 1, we can take out an I, so negative 4 plus or minus 2i rad 6 all over 4. And at this point, you might think you're done. However, because these numbers are all even, we need to simplify it some more. When you simplify it, we want to look and see, so 4, how many times does that go into negative 4? Well, it technically goes in once, but 4 doesn't go into 2 evenly, so we can only divide out by 2. So I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by 2. So this is negative 2 plus or minus. If I divide by 2, that goes away. I rad 6 all over 2. And you do not divide the quantity that's inside of the radical. It's just the numbers in the front. So those coefficients. And then this is simplified, so you could write it like that, or you could write it as this is negative 1 plus or minus I rad 6 over 2. Either of these two ways are fine, as long as you can work to see how you can rewrite it so you can find the solution however it's listed. And the last part of this chapter that we're going over is the discriminant. So the discriminant is the part under the radical, so b squared minus 4ac, that's inside of the quadratic formula. So this quantity here is called the discriminant, and whatever this is actually will help tell you how many solutions you're going to have and what kind they are. So if you find that the discriminant, so if you've got a quadratic and you find b squared minus 4ac, if it's positive, actually we had both negative up here, but if it was positive, then that would mean that we have two real solutions. Number two, real, I'm supposed to put real here. If it's negative, then we're going to have two imaginary solutions, also known as complex. You can refer to them either way. And the reason for that is if you have the square root of a negative number, you're going to get I as a result, so it makes it imaginary. There's no such thing as getting one imaginary solution. You can only get two. There's two real solutions for positive because we can take the square root of a positive number. We can always either simplify it or leave it as is, but that would make it so that they are real solutions. And then if the square root of b squared minus 4ac, so if the discriminant is 0 in here, plus or minus the square root of 0, the 0 goes away and it leaves you with just negative b plus or minus 2a. So then there's only one solution because the plus or minus part goes away. So when the discriminant is 0, that means that there's one solution, and it is a real solution. And that about sums up what the discriminant is. So we're going to look at a few of these, and I recommend after I go over A and or B, pause the video and try a couple of them on your own before watching the rest. So the first thing we need to do is put this into standard form. If it's not in standard form and you go looking for b squared minus 4ac, you're going to use the wrong values. So to put this in standard form, we have 4x squared plus 8x plus 3 equals 0. So a is 4, b is 8, and c is 3. So the discriminant, we want just the part that's inside the radical, so just b squared minus 4ac. So that's going to be 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 3. That's 64 minus 16 times 3, which is 48. And this comes out to 16. So 16, that's positive, which means that we're going to have two real solutions because the discriminant is 16. And you could check that. So if you actually looked at the quadratic formula, if you plugged in the other numbers, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of, we already simplified the discriminant, 16 all over 2 times a. When you go to simplify this, you'd see, okay, square root of 16, that's a positive number. So as a result, I would get two real solutions, two solutions without any imaginary numbers in there. So if you feel comfortable, pause the video, try B, and then keep watching when you're ready. So this is already in standard form. So A is 9, B is negative 6, and C is 1. So we want b squared minus 4ac, the part inside the radical. That's negative 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. 36 minus 36, that is 0. So when you get 0 as the discriminant, that doesn't mean that the solution to this equation is 0. It also doesn't mean that you have 0 solutions. When you get 0 in the discriminant, it means that you have one solution. So this is 1, and it's always real, one real solution. And again, the reason for that, when you write out the quadratic formula, and all of this in here is 0, that part just goes away and leaves you with one solution. And part C, again, feel free to pause this and then keep watching when you're ready. We have A, it's already in standard form, A is 7, B is negative 7, C is 7. That's a lot of 7s. Be careful with the positive and negative signs. So b squared minus 4ac That's equal to negative 7 squared minus 4 times 7 times 7. So that's 49 minus, and then we've got 4 times 49, which is 196. So 49 minus 196 is negative 147. So the discriminant is negative. If the discriminant is negative, that means that there's going to be two solutions, but they are both imaginary or complex solutions. And again, that would be if you actually look at the discriminant, which or at the quadratic formula, which you don't need to do, but that would be negative b is positive 7 plus or minus the square root of, we found that's negative 147 all over 2 times 7. Well, we've got the square root of a negative, so we take out I, which means we're going to get two solutions, and they've got I in there. So thanks for watching. It was a little bit lengthier of a video, and looking forward to teaching you or reviewing with you chapter 2b to 3b, the second part of today's lesson.